Thank you so much, Annie. And the Ask Patients part of that title, that's the hashtag for Savvy Co-op, because it really is about asking patients what it is that they want, what it is that they're feeling, so that we understand their perspective. And I think for everyone, as you know, when COVID-19 hit, I think we all knew that this was impacting our patients and that they were facing new obstacles and barriers. And for X4 Pharmaceuticals, we are developing therapies that we hope are really going to have a profound impact for the patients we're helping who have rare diseases. They're primarily in primary immunodeficiencies and cancer. And especially because we're working with patients with primary immunodeficiencies and cancers where patients may have compromised immune systems, we're suspecting that they would be especially concerned. But we didn't want to make assumptions about how they were feeling, what they were thinking, especially with regards to their participation in clinical trials. I myself am a rare disease and cancer patient, and I had been talking with a lot of my friends who are also patients and had been hearing a lot of mixed things from folks who were saying that they were either scared to go into the hospital for their visits or that they were mad that they couldn't go into the hospital for their visits. So in looking at how we could get rapid feedback from the patient community, I immediately thought of Savvy Co-op and Jen, who I've known for years. I've been a member of Savvy Co-op as a patient co-owner. And actually, I'll hand it over to Jen to kind of talk a little bit about Savvy Co-op and how they work.
Yeah, thanks so much, Michelle, and thanks so much for having me on here to chat about this with you. I'm super excited. It's so wonderful when companies are taking the time, which we did not necessarily see during the pandemic, as people quickly tried to innovate and just, solve problems. And we understand there was a need to do that. But what we really try to stress at Savvy Cooperative is that you need to talk to patients and ask patients to get their feedback, and very specific patients. And Michelle, I know you and I were talking about this too. Sure, you're a patient. I'm a patient as well with many chronic illnesses, both rare and common. But it doesn't mean you're the right patient to talk to ask these problems. So we really emphasize talking to the right patient at the right time. And so, yes, we are a patient cooperative. We cross over 350 different therapeutic areas. So we're disease agnostic, and we really try to help companies or innovators connect directly with those different types of patients or caregivers so that they can do things like user experience research, market research, getting input into clinical trial design or things like this. We really want there to never be a missed opportunity to connect with patients. So we try to make it easy and seamless to talk to the right people at the right time. And we're so happy to help X4 do the work that they were really passionate about doing and help them deliver on making sure that they were getting that feedback from the patients at the start of the pandemic.
And I think one of the things that was sort of interesting for us was that we knew how to reach out to the patient community. We sort of knew we had some really great patient advocacy partners who were willing to help us field the survey. That's one thing that Savvy is great at. It's helping to engage the patient community. That wasn't the exact skill set that we were reaching out to Savvy for in this case. It was around the survey design, and it was the execution and the compensation to the patients. Because I think for a lot of folks, that the logistics of that and especially compensation can be really difficult. And I really leaned a lot on Jen and Ronnie, her colleague, her co-founder, on how to make sure that this was a survey that wasn't really onerous on any of the patients who were taking part. So they were just like, less than 10 minutes, make it less than 10 minutes, make it super easy to answer so that they'll actually participate, and really about making sure that it's fair compensation for any of the patients who are participating. And so working with Savvy, we were able to come up with a survey that I think it was only like 3 questions, maybe. It was like 3 yes/no questions. There was there was a free text and question so that people could just say how their life had changed, what was going on.
I think that that's one of the things that, you and I were discussing that I think is important for other innovators to understand too, is also the approach that you were talking about to how do we get those insights from patients. And so people are quick to do surveys, but they may be so quant focused of yes or no questions or these kind of things. Developing questions is an art and a science, since I should call that certainly a science. That is my personal background as a qualitative researcher. And so therefore we need to find the right way to draw that out from patients, because that's what we see too often is people start to just try to deploy surveys, but it doesn't give them answers. And this is what something to kind of think about when we think about big data to begin with. Big data is oftentimes a signal that something is wrong, but it doesn't tell you how to fix it. So that's where that richer sort of qualitative data comes into play, which I'll let you kind of share maybe some of the learnings that you found. But what what the survey was helping to identify was certain things about their comfort levels or whatnot going into different facilities or whatnot around clinical trials. But then it was when we asked them different questions that allowed them to have an open text format. That's when you saw sort of the rich data come through that helped go, oh wow, now we actually have an action plan and we can understand how to help these patients.
Exactly. It was, I forget now, and I forget who said it, but I remember someone once using the term anecdata. So it was like anecdotal data, which is especially a useful term with like rare disease patients, because so often you're not going to have a giant data set, but you'll have anecdotes, you'll have this qualitative data that really helps you to understand. Because so for us, we were working, I'm working with three patient communities: the WHIM syndrome patient community, the severe congenital neutropenia community, and the Waldenstrom's macroglobulinemia community. And they all have slightly different concerns. They're in they're different age groups. They have different issues that they're dealing with, different lifestyles. And those really came out in the qualitative answers. And although they had some similar responses in like quantitatively, it wasn't, we didn't do like it wasn't thousands of responses that we were getting. Qualitatively, what you could really see were the trends that showed that the WHIM syndrome patient community was the most conservative in how they were responding and in how concerned they were. And the severe congenital neutropenia was the least conservative, which actually, when you kind of looked at the disease and sort of the burden of the disease, it kind of made sense, but it also helped us to kind of understand more how they were responding, and what we could do as a company to help alleviate some of their concerns. So originally the questions were actually about clinical trials and about their comfort, like traveling to a clinical trial site, about whether, if their doctor said it was safe to travel, would they be willing to travel, or would they want to go to a local site, things like that. And so ultimately we did end up implementing virtual visit options for our trials. So, with the investigators, having the conversations as well about their comfort, like having a fully virtual visit with a patient that they've never met before, like having those conversations, seeing what we can implement to the extent possible for patients who are very concerned about COVID-19. But the other things that we did were to implement it beyond that. So we have a no-cost genetic testing program for primary immunodeficiencies for anyone who is suspected of having severe neutropenia. That there's a genetic test that is available, and typically, originally, you would have had to go into the doctor's office for that. But with the information that we were getting about people not even wanting to go into their local doctor's offices or local clinical trial sites, we worked with that program so that you can actually have the genetic test at home. So the kit gets mailed to you at home, and you can mail the kit back to the company, to the Invitae, the genetic testing company, because it's not just about the clinical trial, it's about that qualitative data as well. It's about what they're saying about not leaving home, about the extent of their concern. And that really helped add context and helped us to change our thinking and our decision making around multiple areas of the company.
And one of the things that I think X4.
sorry, Jen, before you hop in, I'm just going to say we have about 1 more minute, but I think we're going to have a lot of follow-up questions for you and the discussion. But I know, Jen, you're not going to be a part of the discussion, so I wanted to give you a chance to add anything else you wanted to make sure we stir in.
Yeah, I think just one important thing that I would like to highlight is the fact that X4 was also committed to making sure that the feedback loop was closed. Michele just itemized a lot of different things that they did as a company based on what the patient said. And I'm sure for any sort of patients on here listening, you can imagine most of the time patients contribute into a black box that's closed up and you never hear about how you made an impact either in clinical trials or in any other sort of insights. And so it's so important, and I'm so grateful that X4 also gave the results that they shared internally with their company and created a patient-friendly format that we then distributed back to the patients. We also did the patient payments, but we made sure that they got the feedback as well, which I think is a really great way to close the loop.
Can I just ask one question? I know we'll get into this to the discussion, but in this setting, in this scenario, because this is a really novel partnership, who owns the data that was collected? Is it X4 Pharma? Is it Savvy Co-op? Or is there a patient community? Because you're collecting data on a lot of different patient communities.
So it's a great question. And so at Savvy, we work really hard with our clients and partners to help them understand too how we believe about sort of ownership of data. And so we believe that the patient owns their data. You don't own it. However, what we say that the client in this case owns are the results, so that they can say, you know, cumulatively, we've aggregated the things together and here's what we've learned. And that's what they can use however they want. But we make sure that they know that they don't own the patient data, that that's really something that the patient owns. Savvy doesn't own any of that. We are just sort of the Switzerland trying to help make sure that patients are protected at every sort of step of the way. So we're just kind of the middle guys that try to advocate for the patients.
Okay, great.
I think for any company that really believes in that model of the patients owning their data, wanting to close the loop with patients, like really focused on patients, Savvy is just a fantastic partner in helping to make that happen.